Hey everyone. So, I don't know exactly where this is going to go, but I think we need to talk about it. Namely that I want to talk about this idea of values. What are leftist values versus reactionary views or views that are first thoughts, if we want to use the Terry Pratchett language, right? The thing I want to kind of express. Oh, Rick Nelson, thank you so much for the $8 super chatted. Conservatives like ADF, FRC, and Heritage are evil, spreading hate worldwide. True. And I'm very tired of blockchain and proof of work scams. Also true. Very nice. Mm-hmm. So with this segment, what I want to talk about is the idea of values over views. And what that is that while I don't think ideology should ever be ironclad in the sense that you can never be moved off a point or never moved off a particular view, I think that I want to differentiate these as two separate things, right? So on the one hand, we have values, which are espoused, reasoned out ways of being, or at very least internalized ways of the way you wish to see the world. Views tend to be based more on your own intuition, at least in this framing that I'm using, and tend to be more reactionary. Not in the sense of like right-leaning reactionary, just reactionary. They tend to be more based on our internal reactions, based on our own intuition, things like that. And the reason I want to differentiate these things is that I think a lot of times what people do is they tend to have views that are, they're fine, they're whatever, but then they build their values, their espoused values, their way they communicate to the world how they want things to change on those. And on one hand, that's fine. On the other hand, I kind of find that to be almost like the cart before the horse. What I mean is that one of the things that I've had to learn in my life is that I have to put my values before my sort of instinctive or reactionary views. A good way to think of this, or an example of it, would be, I'll talk about like a younger version of me because I think that's a better example. When I was younger, reactive. That might be better than reactionary. Reactive. So reactive view versus espoused values. One of the values that when me and Xena started this channel, was the idea that we want to be as inclusive as humanly possible. Inclusive as humanly possible. That means everyone's welcome. And that's been tested sometimes, right? There's times where we have, our own internal reactions, our own, either internalized transphobia or our own struggles with understanding a particular phenomenon. And that's difficult. For the longest time when I was younger, I didn't understand trans folks, mostly because I was in the closet and deeply buried that crap. As I got older, I started understanding binary trans people, but not non-binary ones. And then over time, that view was shifted, partially by dating my now partner, but also just kind of having things kind of presented to me in a different way. And the same can be said as of last year about xenogenders and plural folks. Now, when I say values before views, it's that those instinctive views, those reactive views, we often tend to have a gut instinct about a thing, and then we go off on it. And I find that's problematic because I found in my time on this weird-ass planet that I can't necessarily trust those all the time. Because sometimes they're based on a lot of my own internal difficulties. They're based on my own inadequacies or my own insecurities, or they're based on my flaws in my psychology, right? And so I guess what I'm sort of differentiating here is that for me, when starting this channel, the value that was espoused was being as inclusive as possible. So then xenogenders come up as a discussion. Okay, does this appear to cause harm? No. Does this seem to have any real negative bearing on the world other than like people don't get it? No. Is there a way in which this could be cleaned up, but probably isn't necessarily my place to do it? Yeah, okay, fair. And so what I decided to do is, rather than go with my gut instinct of being, yes, that's good, no, that isn't, we welcome people who are xenogender. Right? I can't support the notion of neopronouns as a valid metaphor of internal expression of non-bimodal or spectrum-based gender, and then be like, but xenogenders are where I draw the line. That doesn't work with that value. If I was that way, it would actually be, I would not be out of integrity. My words and my values and my words wouldn't match up. This is the thing I've talked about a lot with the concept of guilt. Guilt is literally when your values don't align with your behavior or your words, to me. That's what guilt is. It's like, you say you're going to do something, you don't. That's your words don't match up with your actions, that kind of stuff. And so I guess what I'm trying to sort of elucidate to everybody, or trying to get them to understand, is that when I see something I don't get, I have to kind of curb that internal reaction. I came from a very, and I'm using this term properly, reactionary family. Well, a majority of them were Dems. Some of them had some very gross views. I've mentioned before on this stream about my grandmother being a racist. She literally trained a Great Dane to bark at African American people. It was not a great way to grow up. So I had to educate myself and learn a way out of those views, because I realized that those instinctive things, those ways that I had been, that they attempted to program me, were not actually working towards the world I want. Jolly said in chat, what I do not understand is not something I should hate necessarily. True. Tiamat said new experiences should prompt curiosity and not rejection. Also true. So for example, one of the things that happened with me is, we had plural folks start to show up in the server, and there was an ask to get plural kit. And I went, I talked to Zine about it for a minute, and we went, our value requires us to do this. Like, it doesn't matter how we feel about that phenomenon. Our value requires us to do this. Now, I am a supporter of plural people. I just am.
Same here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And while I don't understand everything, and while I am still playing with that map myself for personal reasons, the fact is that I don't get everything, and I'm trying to learn. But it's not just effective for me in my personal life, it's also effective for me in my professional one. Shortly after that, I suddenly had one or two clients come out that had those experiences, and I had suddenly a map when I was still learning, but a map nevertheless to discuss that. And so I guess what I want to talk about is just this idea of, when you notice these reactions in yourself about anything, I think it's really fucking important to ask yourself, where are my values? What are my values? If you don't have a value about this particular situation, why not? Is it just something you hadn't considered before? Is it a situation that's just outside of your normal frame of reference? But to me, it's really freaking important, because it comes down to this idea of, how do we push for the world to be better when we keep reactively acting out? And the thing is, I could say there's people that are worse at this, and there absolutely is. I can also say that there are people who do this and don't always catch themselves or even acknowledge it. And this isn't just true of righties, though, again, their media tends to focus on fear and create that reactivity. But even on the left, this stuff happens. And so I guess I just want to explain this idea of, like, ask yourself, whenever you're in this position, what are your values? And are you living by them? Do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I think I noticed this a lot. Where you might see people like Oppression Olympics kind of do the thing, where, some trauma or some, quality about somebody was brought up, and it's compared to somebody else's. And this stuff doesn't really work, for a lot of reasons, but I always try and go and check back in with that inclusivity value, right? If there is a way that I can somehow hold hey, this group over here is suffering, and hey, this group over here is also suffering. Okay. And hold on to that and think about that more and go, okay, how do we actually like address the concerns of everybody, right? How do we actually be inclusive towards everyone? I think I get a lot further than just getting stuck in who's worse or, you know, having to like separate out things weirdly. And that's definitely one of those places where I always kind of check in with that value for me. Let's see, there's another way that people get really reactive about that stuff too. It's not just Depression Olympics. It's like,
Well, I'll give you.
oh, how do I explain it to other people? Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing activism and you're like, shit, I'm doing, you know, somebody's got some random question about something that's, you know, still kind of figuring itself out, xenogenders, you know, plurifolk, whatever. Okay. And you're like, how do I even bridge that? Well, and I think there gets to be a lot of fear there because suddenly you're like feeling like you've got to, you know, have a reason or be able to explain this in some situation that you're in. And one reaction could be to kind of throw it under the bus or not really like address it, right? The other reaction, the one that would follow with my value of being as inclusive as possible, would be to learn more about it and, you know, figure out what I can do with that. What is appropriate for that situation?
Yeah. No, and see, I have an example for this that actually came up recently. I posted something on Twitter for those that saw it, and it was basically this idea. One of my frustrations is the idea of idpol. And here's why. We often make fun of liberals because for them, idpol is all about just having more female drone pilots. It doesn't matter what the larger ramifications are. We just want to fill those seats and have them be more inclusive, right? That's the thing. That's the kind of stuff we make fun of them for. I'm not really big into the making fun of libs thing. I think that's really poor planning on the part of lefties. But I also get really frustrated with lefties about this because unless we're talking about certain marginalized groups in certain situations, a lot of lefties have essentially coded themselves to be immediately rejecting of idpol. And the problem is, I think that's just as dumb. I get the sort of reactive notion that you have to be very, very skeptical of that because the problem is, yes, you should be listening to black voices, but Candace Owens is not reliable. You should listen to trans women, but Blair White is not reliable.
Well, and notice that listen is not the same as take the action they are suggesting that you take.
Well, and
hearing voices is not the same as actually acting from that place.
Well, it's also checking it against the experiences of other people. Like, there's often this thing is like this community is saying this, but these communities are not
a monolith for one.
Yeah, they're not a monolith for one, and two, we can check. Like, if you ask me and like 30 other trans girls, and you ask Blair, you're going to come up with a lot more consistency between me and the other girls, hopefully, than you would from Blair. And this is kind of my overall point, is that to some degree, this is where I feel like both sides are sort of reactive. Liberals are just trying to do respectability politics and shove someone in the seat, not really thinking about the meaning of what they're doing there. Sure, I like that trans people can be in the military, but having a trans drone pilot doesn't actually fix the problem of not doing drone strikes. Gladiator Geek said, Candace Owens doesn't count, lol. All skin folk aren't kinfolk, as we say in the black community. I don't know if it's okay for me to say that sentence, but that is funny. I do like that idea. But this is the problem that I have, is that lefties need to get better about being willing to do this. I actually saw Vosh walk this back recently. He had that conversation with that indigenous activist, and she actually pushed him back on a couple points about recontextualizing aspects of culture and being willing to listen in a more effective way. I think that's kind of a thing we have to all work on. My experience as a trans woman is valid. It doesn't overwrite everyone, and it's not a win button to the argument, but it can't be just ignored out of hand. Right? Like, that's the problem, is I see it hard on the other side. This is where we get into like class reductionism, right? Where it's like, we're going to ignore everything but class isn't always reliable as a metric of checking this stuff out. And so I feel like there's a problem on both sides. One of them is highly engaging in it without any reflection, and the other one is reactively pushing against a thing because they see the issues, but they don't understand how to fix to keep the parts that matter. it's baby in bathwater, right? Libs just stick their whole head in the dirty ass water, and lefties just toss the kid out into the garbage. And I think you have to find a better way to do that. And this is what I mean by the reactive view. It's just a view rather than a value of we need to listen to marginalized people, but listen doesn't mean we necessarily have to always agree. And it doesn't mean we always have to listen when that seems to go against the overall plurality of ideas. Just because someone like, I don't know, Calvin Guerra says that something isn't transphobic, if a bunch of trans men say it is, sorry, you lost by consensus, Calvin. I don't know what to tell you. Sorry, dude. Yeah, the way she recontextualized conversations about sacred lands to natives in a way that draws on understanding of cultural Christianity not being treated in the same non-hegemonic religion. Yeah, Fesh, that situation was really good, and I was really glad to see like Vosh be pushed on that. That was a really good argument, and she was a delight, just an absolute delight.
That was a really good one.
Yeah. So I guess what I want to just make clear to you guys is like, for me, my value is this. I want to listen to marginalized people. I'm also going to push back on somebody, especially if I see them using their marginalization as a way in which to enact violence. Right? We see this with all writers all the time, right? White supremacists will go off and basically talk about how there's the great replacement, how they're being, oppressed, how you can't be a cis white guy in the world anymore, because they want to co-opt that victimhood. And in the same way, this is why you have people who are essentially tokens, like Blair White, Candace Owens, etc. And the problem is that we know them to be bad faith actors. My value is we should listen to marginalized people, and we should still look to data. We should still try to get a consensus from people from that group. And we should be willing to call out those groups when there's something going on that we don't like. There's constant jokes online about trans Twitter being incredibly aggressive. It's not necessarily a thing that isn't true. And so the thing is that like, I think there's a very real way in which, that probably needs some critique. But I understand why it's happening, right? If you're part of the trans community, you've probably been through some shit and you're going to act out. Especially when something seems like it seems like a new monster, new thing to fight. You react. It's fine. I get it. And I understand the Dave Chappelle thing, Dave feeling like, the LGBT is having successes where African Americans may not be. And there's this thing around stolen valor. But the joke about this is that like, you can be for people of color and be for trans people.
Yup.
Like literally in one special, Dave Chappelle just ignored black trans women. Like they don't exist in his mind. It's an impossibility. By the way, if you haven't seen FD Signifier's video about Dave Chappelle and his transphobia, highly recommended it.
It was super good.
And also big thanks to FD Signifier for the shout out. We got like 200 plus subs. It was really fucking great. But I mean, I'll be honest, seeing that video was incredibly... That and his buck-breaking video were actually really healing for me, because I've told this on stream multiple times, but I legitimately started gaslighting myself a little bit. The colloquial term for gaslight, not the clinical. Because I kept going, maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe I'm wrong about this situation. I was thinking about the Professor Flowers thing, and I was like, I'm really having a hard time with this. And then I'm watching this and going, no, there really is this conservative element within certain parts of marginalized communities that really do seem to want to reify certain situations. It's like that one tweet I saw where I think it was like either Tariq Nasheed or another individual where it was like, he was like, socialism is poison. The only thing that'll help black people is black capitalism. And an African-American person responded and was like, capitalism hasn't even helped white people. What's it going to do for us? And I was like, true. Like, that's just true. Like, it was so nice to see something that actually like supported where I was coming from and understood like, no, when you make jokes like that, it's not okay. I don't have to tear this person down. I don't have to make fun of them. I don't do shit. But again, my value is I want to listen to what marginalized people say. But when a marginalized person, same as a person in the majority, says some dumb shit, we need to call it out. What Dave Chappelle did was wrong. Like, that's not hard, guys. Like, that's not that difficult. The way that, like, what? Lily Cade. Lily Cade is literally a member of two marginalized groups, right? Lesbian and sex worker or former sex worker. Guess what? She's insane. You don't believe me? Go watch that video. I'm not going to reread her crap today. We need to get better at this because id poll only matters to a certain degree, but it still has a purpose. It's still a way in understanding this, not to do the Oppression Olympics thing, but to come from an intersectional analysis and understand the best ways to help these groups and call out bad actors within them. You don't have to do the extremes. You don't have to ignore all identity politics, and you don't necessarily have to just stick your head in the water and pretend that you don't want to engage with it. Neither of these are the only options. Like, seriously, if you're just listening to me as like the one trans woman you follow, please go check out other trans women. Kat Black, for example, Jessie Gender, ContraPoints, Samantha Lux. The list goes on. There are numerous trans women that have really good views and really good ideas and really good things. There's also some not great ones, but I'm not going to mention them. But the thing is that I do really need you guys to understand this, is that your values need to come before your reactive views. What is your value? Okay, my value is that identity has a purpose and a place in the discussion, but it is not the sole winning attribute, and it shouldn't be groups shouldn't be viewed in this monolithic way. We need to address these things with nuance. That's what we've tried to do on this channel the whole time. My value is never to look at simplistic situations, to which a lot of people in comments go, well, then why do you look at the conservatives in a simple way? Because conservatives have never given me a reason not to. I've waded into conservative media, much to my own mental health issues. And you know what I see is a lot of toxicity, a lot of backbiting when it's not an optical issue. And the problem is a lot of lying, misrepresenting data, completely lying about data. Go watch H Bomber guy's thing about soy milk or anti-vaxxers or any of these other discussions.
I think the other big thing is that it's also important to say what you're for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if all you've got is reactionary views, right? You just have those views. That doesn't really tell us what you're for.
Yeah, if you're always against something, we don't actually know what that is. That's the trick the alt-right used, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Where they would talk they're against these things, but you would start noticing the empty space in between of what they actually were standing for, and it turns out many of them were Nazis.
Yeah. So do us a favor, don't be Nazis, and actually say what your values are.
Yeah, I mean, like, I just need people to understand that, like.
Well, and I think Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I just want people to understand that, like, it's very easy to frame people like Lily Cade as this awful monster, and she's clearly mentally ill and clearly, like, really not okay and should never be around human beings again, in my opinion. But especially anyone trans, Jesus. But here's the thing, though. Lily Cades don't happen magically. They happen through reactionary, fear-driven groups taking advantage of people's fears and using their reactive, instinctive disgust about a group or a thing and weaponizing it. The fact of the matter is that we have seen this in the left. We've seen people go bad. We've seen people who have lashed out or said really awful or dumb things who are nominally on the left. The fact of the matter is that anyone can kind of go down this road. I've said it before. Fascism is not just a political ideology. It is also, and in my opinion, it is a mental health issue. Being fascistic, in my opinion, should be in the DSM-6. Because it always leads to absolute irrational mess, nonsense, and atrocity. That's why I say that conservatism is pathological, because it doesn't make sense. There's no real policies. There's no really. It's just reactionary acting out again and again and again. And if we're not careful, those parts of us can be activated. The thing we need to keep in mind is anyone can go down this road. It's not just these monsters, and we sleep securely in our beds knowing we never have those possibilities. I try to remind myself that any human being has these possibilities in them. That's what makes the atrocities that the Nazis or other groups did so awful, is they were just humans acting in a reactive, fearful manner. This is why values have to go before instinctive, reactive views. You had something? I'm sorry, I went on a tangent.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just going to kind of close it out, so it's okay.
Yeah, let's do it. Do it.
I think my only other thing here, too, is that having strong values and starting from there, I also find really useful for when I'm in, disagreements with people. Because then I know where I need to act from, right? It does help cut through a lot of the reactivity just with person to person, right? If my goal is something about safety or something about making sure that people are included, and that's where I'm trying to act towards, and I've identified that goal, that's way easier than just being reactive about something willy-nilly in the situation. And I find that it usually helps the other person too, because they're like, oh, okay, you're dealing with a safety issue. I see where you're coming from now, because you've actually been able to tell me what the fuck your value is right now. That's about all I had. Other than that, if you're thinking about this and watching it, maybe you've got some of your own values. Definitely put those in the comments. We'd love to see it.
Yeah, what things are important to you?
Our community is really cool, and we know that a lot of you feel very, very strongly on stuff just like we do. So feel free to leave a comment and tell us about that.
All right, guys, we can talk more about this another time, but we'll see you in the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. You can also ring the bell if you want to be notified of our videos. If you want to help the channel, you can donate at streamlabs.com/transgirltherapist/tip. You also can become a patron at patreon.com/transgirltherapist. For as low as $3, you can support our channel. Thanks for watching.